I'm Effie Kapsalis. I'm the Senior Digital Program Officer, leading the digital strategy for the American Women's History Initiative and the Open Access Initiative. Today, we are ending our last panel on the topic of creativity. I think this is a wonderful place to end on a space of such possibility. We have touched on a lot of the considerations, the cultural responsibilities, the ways that we need to make our collections and our data accessible and representative of our diverse cultural landscape. But we have to also remember that we hold the products of our culture's creativity. And I think it's very important not only that we imbue that to our visitors and make our experiences delightful and full of wonder, but I think it's also important that we imbue creative practices into our own processes, which can seem really daunting when you're talking about digitizing lots of collections and describing things. So I am very pleased to invite three speakers today to talk about this. First up, Jane Alexander, who's the Chief Digital Information Officer for the Cleveland Museum of Art, Gabriel, Florit, and Bonnie Berkowitz, who are graphics reporters from the Washington Post, and finally, artist Mario Klingemann. Jane.
Good afternoon, and thank you for including me on this amazing 2 days. And I am going to be going just really fast to give you sort of lots of ideas of what we're doing with creativity once you have a digitized collection, and here we go. So in 2013, we opened up a new building at the Cleveland Museum of Art, and during the 7-year process of a $320 million renovation, the museum was smart enough to say, let's digitize our entire collection. So we were almost there. We're 90%, and we'll be, not only will we be 100% by 2021, but the things that are left are things that have to be built, or things in conservation, or things that are really large and big. So I always bring this up because our mission since 1916 has been Cleveland Museum of Art creates transformative experiences through art for the benefit of all people forever. And I also bring this image up because that's the director of the Cleveland Museum of Art, and not only does leadership have to be behind you in this, but also that this is really about using digital to get people to connect to our collection in the 21st century. So this year we had a banner year. We had 850,000 people visit it. We collected a lot of data. But what did we learn from this data? Is always the question, and this is what I'm saying, is Artland Gallery working? And my question, first of all, is how many people know what Artland Gallery is, or have seen it, or been there in general? Okay, so it is this big. Since 2012, it was initially called Gallery 1. It's been an iterative space, and it was created to take away the intimidation of an art museum and give visitors the tool sets to be able to really feel comfortable, look closer, understand composition, understand purpose, understand emotion, and just connect with the collection, but actually to get into the galleries. So we've done a lot of things, and part of it is about that to relate the physical to the digital in this space, and so that when you see an object, you're attracted, and then you'll go back and look again. We also show more. Not only do we have 360 views of all our images, but we have photogrammetry now. And we play with scale. You know, it's really awesome that when you have digital, you can make things big and you can explore them. But at the end of all our interactives, we actually show the actual size, which is pulled from the metadata in our collection management system. So you know what you're looking for. This part of it also, because of what we collect, our digital asset management system, the way we digitize our collection, and our collection management system, we are able to think about labels in a new way because we actually keep all this. We're the composition of an object. We related to if you wear something, the purpose of an object. And with having all this kind of metadata, you can really think about what is a digital label. And a digital label is not just text on an iPad. It could be something oh so much more. And so I just bring that up, that this is all the information we have for the future of labels. So to constantly create, you need a flexible and integrated back end. I show this because every single thing we do within our department, I wanted to show sort of our outward-facing Artlands, our e-commerce things, our open access things, our library systems, and our internal systems, and how they all relate. But the main center is really Athena, which is our collection management system, and Piction, our digital asset management system, and our awesome middleware system. And what that does for our art gallery and our online collection is that you can update things every 15 minutes. So a curator wants to change a date. An interpreter has a new fun fact. People in the registrar's office notice something wrong. It goes live every 15 minutes. And by doing that, that means that there's less fear about things can change right away. We used to have to go through 22 approvals to get something online. That's no longer needed because you can change it and it will reflect at the latest in 15 minutes. So we've always made our data transparent. We've collected lots of data on all the games. That's from the original Gallery 1. When people were favoriting things, one of the themes would come up. It would show top 50 favorites, top 10 favorites. It would show the games people are playing. We would collect, we'd share, and we would analyze to the best we could. And in the first year after Gallery 1, this was pretty exciting. We had an increase of 31% visitorship, and we had attendance of 29% families. But that really wasn't the goal of Gallery 1, nor could we take totally credit for it because it was a new museum. So there was a study in 2015, but it was the study in 2015 was 2 years after we'd opened. We'd already made a lot of iterative changes, and it really wasn't in the best practice. And there is a study, I bring it up so you can go view it, and it's a white paper on how do you actually evaluate digital experience to show that they're working. So we were a case study within that, and finding that was really great to see that people who went into Artland Gallery said that they self-reported greater gains of understanding. And we didn't know, they didn't know we were testing Artlands or what we were testing, so that was pretty exciting. But the truth was our main goal was the intimidation gone? Were people going to the galleries and looking at art? We still didn't know. So another thing is we're a free museum. We don't know where people are going. We don't ticket things. So this is actually how we counted people coming in the museum. We changed that to sensors. So now not only do we know where you're coming in at every exit, but we also know what galleries you're going in and how you're going out. And we started to count that. But we still didn't know exactly where we were going, the pathways they're going, how long they're staying, what they were going to next. So we have Meraki access points throughout every public space in the museum. And this is truly big data. 1 to 2 million rows of data per day is big data. And so we wanted to do something with this, but we also knew it was noisy data. We didn't know how to translate devices to visitors. We had to build trust since this was good data. So we hired data scientists, and that has been amazing in helping us visualize what this means. Now, of course, they helped us work with the noisy data, we drew pathways of what were real pathways, and we also talked about like what is a visitor, because people wear a Fitbit and they have an iPad and they have a phone in their pocket, and also some people don't even turn on their Wi-Fi. So that was really good, and we made these amazing live dashboards and we showed them to leadership, and we were so proud of them, and no one knew how to read these or how to use these. So that was. So then we also built these things, and it showed how people were traveling within the museum. You can see them moving, and you could uncheck the first 5 places if someone started in a certain gallery where they went, and we thought, this is super cool, and we showed it to leadership, and they said, we don't know what that means. So data science is also iterative, and so we worked with them on putting things together, and at the same time, we had Kusama exhibit last year, which was a great exhibit to have because it wasn't normal on the people that came in, and they had to start in the atrium, and every space they went was a 15-minute iterative, so we were able to like really test the Meraki data that it was working and build trust and look at the data. So we found out that Visitors who didn't go into Artland spent on an average of 2.2 hours at the museum, and they went to fewer spaces overall, and people spent 12 minutes longer if they had gone to Artland. And okay, that's not so interesting. But if you had spent 5 minutes in Artland, they spent an average of 36 minutes more at the museum, but they also interacted with more spaces, and they also, on top of that time, went to the cafe and meant they spent some money, so that was cool too. So this was big. This is the question. Iteratively, we've been changing Gallery 1 to Artland Gallery for 10 years, and people are not only doing, they're spending 35 minutes longer in the museum. So then we can say, does the selection of artworks you start with actually impact your visit? So now we're looking at all our different interactives in our games and the artworks you're starting with, and we're beginning to see patterns of where people are going or not going. And we don't have that yet, but that's like something that we're going with. So the reason I'm showing you this next thing is because I heard this little secret about open access coming to these 17, 19 museums here somewhere. So I thought I'd show you. Last January, we were able to do this because of how we have put together an integrated back-end system and the creativity that we were allowed to, before we even opened, share with people so that we could have an opening of our open access. So I just want, yay. And that brings us like into the digital age, again, with our mission. And I just want to sort of point out, what we do is we make the data and so available and the images in so many different formats, and we let you know exactly, go do what you want with it. And by making it in different formats, it actually fosters creativity from people we never even thought about. And then I just wanted to quickly show, like, the other thing is, like, that's the water lilies, one of our most famous, everybody knows it, loves it, and that's how many views on the website between May and August. That's an object I didn't even know was in our collection. That's how many views on Wikimedia. So it's Wikipedia. So that's, and then also the top 10 artworks in our collection online, those are our fan favorites. The top 10 in Wikipedia, completely different. So what does that tell us? I don't know, but it tells us. And here's even this chart of Wikimedia page views versus collection online. It's totally different what people are looking for. So what you think the world or your audience wants, you open it up to a whole lot more. And so we're trying to increase our attendance. There's our director at the opening of Open Access. And now we're trying to show, does this foster engagement, creativity? You know, how do we really use all this visualization, all these things to show that it really does increase the museum experience? And so the way we're doing it is, I don't know, but that's where I end.
Ooh, you can find our slides in there.
Hi, that was great by Jane, and hers was such a big, broad topic, and all we're going to do is tell some stories. We're from the Washington Post, and that's what we do. And we thought we would show you guys how we have used, we're the end users, so we'd like to show how we've used some of the Smithsonian content in stories. Oh, and it looks good on the big screen, yay.
Yeah.
We were worried about that. We don't design for the giant screen, so. Basically for us, storytelling is always the primary goal. But we can, I know this conference is about using and creating digital assets, but I also wanted to put in a plug for the importance of just access in general. Not just open access to the assets that you have, but also access to the people you work with, the experts you work with, and to even the sites where some of these things are. And we'll show you how that's relevant. This story was about a skull, just one. It's unique. The story is unusual because we started with a tech innovation, the new iOS support for augmented reality. And we wanted to tell a story, though. We didn't want to just say, oh, here's a cool thing we can do now on your phones. So we went to the Natural History Museum, and we had a wonderful paleontologist just take us around the innards of the museum and show us some things that would not be in the new fossil hall. This was about 9 months before the new fossil hall debuted. And he told us story after story, and we found one we liked about this triceratops that is actually maybe or may not be a triceratops. And so we made a little story about that. One of the great things was that Gabriel and another of our colleagues was able to, here we go, was able to do this themselves. The museum allowed us into the site. They gave us an enormous amount of time with this. How long did this take you guys?
2 hours.
Okay. Fortunately, no visitors around at the time. This is what they were doing.
2,500 photos, 2 hours.
So we created our own. We tend to create our own assets if we possibly can. Wow, how long is this video?
I'll just move on to the next.
So this is an example of the AR that you can put it on your conference table or next to your, I took a picture of it next to our bearded dragon, which was kind of funny.
This is
So,
in the 8th floor of the Washington Post.
Right. Okay, the next thing, we actually did use some assets digitized by the Smithsonian folks. This was for when the new fossil hall opened at the Natural History Museum. We used a bunch of their photos, and Kristen Quarles was wonderful. She's one of the people I worked with, and she was extraordinarily patient with all my questions. She got all the information we needed. We got photos from various times in the museum's history, or in the fossil hall's history. And then we went to the new one. This project was unusual in a couple of ways. One, we didn't create all the assets. And another one, we started with high-tech and then went to low-tech instead. This tour through that you can see, we originally had done it in 3D models, and we had modeled a bunch of some of the main exhibits in there that were going to be in there. And we decided once we created it and saw it, it just didn't have the visual energy of the space that the space has. And so we threw out our model at the last minute. We got rid of all that work. And we ended up having a guy walk around using a gimbal to stabilize the camera. And he just did a tour walking between the various things that we wanted to highlight. So sometimes the high tech doesn't work as well for our purposes, for the storytelling. We did more than a dozen visits. We talked to everybody, scientists, curators, administrators, the Canadian company that mounted the fossils. I talked to the caterer at one point. I mean, we talked to everybody. We were there, I believe, something like 20 times. We really did a lot of background, and we did end up using a 3D model. This model was digitized by the paleontology department, I believe, or by the museum folks, for lack of a really specific term. And we adapted it for our purposes in the section that talked about the new T-Rex. I think that's the end of that one. Spacesuits. Okay, for this one, this was for the 50th anniversary of the moon landing, and I don't know even who had the idea in our department. Was that you?
Don't remember. It's a long time ago.
Someone had
More
the
than 2 weeks
idea.
ago.
I know, seriously. In 2 weeks, how much news have we had?
Right.
So, but we even had our fashion critic talk about which boots would be best to walk around in, because you can, you have to be able to reuse good fashion, right? So we had all kinds of content with the spacesuits, but we wanted to get 3D models of the actual spacesuits. So Gabriel and a couple of other people went to where they were, and they were in California and in Texas and in Florida and at 2 different museums in the DC area. And they turned them in, you created the 3D models, and
Yeah,
he knows how he did it. I just tell the words, so.
Just like the dinosaur project, we took 2,500 photos of each of these suits and then reconstructed them with the usual photogrammetry techniques. And then the biggest complicator for our projects is that these things all have to be viewable on the web. So all the things that we've been looking at, that's just a screen recording of the browser. So it means that most of my time is spent in bringing a model of, 1 million, 2 million vertices, gigabytes, and making it something that's 3 megabytes at most, so that your browser won't crash, and so that your phone, won't take minutes to just look at one suit. And so that's a challenge that, it's a challenge. But the fun thing about this project is that some of these suits, this is just, it's amazing. What a privilege to be working with this material. As you saw in the previous one, the Apollo one, there's spots in the lower part of the legs that when we got the footage first, we thought, oh, there must be something wrong with the camera because it was a little bit dusty. But it's actually moon dust, Neil Armstrong's moon dust, which is amazing. Out of this world.
And this could not have happened without access, not just to the museums here, but to the suit at SpaceX and the suit at, in Houston and at Boeing and in Cape Canaveral, I think it was?
I think so.
Kennedy Space Center. Okay, this one is an oldie but a goodie. This was from when the National Museum of African American History opened. And this is pretty much the opposite of what we did with the Fossil Hall. This one, it's such a large space, and there's so much going on that we felt the models worked best, the 3D model worked best, because it was an inherently lacking in visual clutter. And for our purposes, this worked better, because then we could pull people's eyes directly to the things that we wanted to show them. And at some point, if you scroll, they were tool tips, so that if you hover over them, videos would come up and things like that we don't do as much anymore. Usually we like to show everybody the content and not make them find it, but that was 3 years ago, so we were learning. But we had several visits. We were allowed several visits during the construction of the museum. We talked to curators from every section to pull out the most meaningful pieces, the pieces that meant the most to them, because they are the experts, so they were the ones who were best able to tell us what we should highlight, basically. And we used, what? Oh, and we used we also were able to work with the architect to get a very basic version of the model. The actual architect's model was way, way, way too big for our computers to even mess with. So we got them to do a scaled down version for us, and we put our own textures and everything else on it. Or Aaron Steckelberg just spent an enormous amount of time doing wonderful work on this. And it worked to tell our story. So, and our time's almost up, but I'm almost done. Basically, I wanted to say that the Washington Post is a pretty large publication for an end user. We're one of the bigger papers in the country. We are very lucky to have really good assets. We have a lot of people in our department. We also have just resources that a lot of places aren't going to have. So what you guys do is extremely important for us, but also especially for smaller media outlets. Most of you, I'm sure, are not working in Washington, D.C. or in New York City. You're working in other places. And what you do is just vital for storytelling for people like us who don't have the same resources that we can go and shoot our own things. We really appreciate it, and we rely heavily on all of you. So thank you very much, and please give us story ideas.
Hello, I'm Mario Klingemann. I hope my slide, yes. My talk is called Dirty Hands. I don't know if that will be revealed why. And I'm an artist and will give you a very short idea like how I engage with the data you share and how I try to use it for my own creativity, and maybe either you will learn something how to engage more people like me or how to prevent people like me from doing that. Because maybe some of the things I'm doing to the data is not really what you want me to do. So if you had asked me a while ago, like somebody like, oh, do you want to go to the Freer Sackler, look at some plates, I would probably not have been the first one to raise my hands. But sometimes it might just need a little bit of motivation, and I have to go on a little tangent exactly to our last summer holiday where we went to Scotland, and there was this beach, which if it comes to beaches and you are more of a sand person, it might not be exactly what you're looking for, but well, we like it wild, and well, whilst looking around, we suddenly discovered, oh my God, there are these little treasures, and well, looking around furthermore, we realized, my goodness, this beach is full with these shards from kind of Victorian pottery or stuff people threw away. And well, that's kind of how we spent the rest of our vacation, finding these things, developing systems, how we can find other beaches that might have them. What are the rules? Like, why does this stuff end up here? Well, the river might have been a giveaway. And you also develop techniques because you, like, when there's a lot of other things that you don't want, white stuff, other things, so you push it aside. And in the end, this was just the stuff we collected in a few hours. I think we took back like 5 kilos of these shards. And well, in the end, of course, well, this is not about pottery, but it's more about I engage in a similar way with data. And well, in this case, I'm actually considering now to build me a tool which allows me to maybe go through all those shared data you have and identify where did this shard come from? Can I be able to find this? But actually what I want to say with this is I like my data sets like I like my beaches, wild, open, and a little dirty. So, because when I engage with a data set, what I like is at least the illusion that when I go through this, I can make discoveries that maybe somebody else hasn't noticed. Like the idea that, well, some book was just scanned in by a machine, and like the only person who had seen that page was the person who put it on a scanner. And if I go back and I can actually find something that's not already pre-curated. So that's for me the kind of the explorer spirit, why I like these. So one of the first kind of dirty dumps that was made was by the British Library about 6 years ago, where they put 1 million images that were scanned automatically from books onto the internet, and back then it was Flickr. I think right now it's a bad idea. Now there are better ways to put it, but so this was totally unsorted, and well, you had to actually go in there and yeah, clean it up yourself. But actually, going through dirty data can be a joyful experience. And so, well, in reality, kind of this is an example how I did it in the past. So you look at a whole lot of different things and then you try to find ways like sort it, And while you're ordering these things, you start discovering your own patterns, and you see certain, clusters in the data, and you look at all these objects and you start getting ideas, and come across objects that you didn't expect. Because of course, if I go into something where I already know what I will find, then it's not so much fun. So, of course, nowadays we have beautiful tools because, of course, going through millions of images is very time-consuming. So I'm using machine learning tools to help me with the initial sorting, finding clusters, ordering things by similarity, using feature vectors. And then, yes, you can start making a little bit of order, finding colorful faces, starting a rock collection or rock tool collection. I didn't know that I was interested in finding rock tools, but once you get that collecting fever, you are happy of every single other one that fits that. Geological profiles, they're a bit dirty there, but they are extremely beautiful. And if you just you would probably never actively go and search them out, except if you are geologists. Or you find examples of early plagiarism, where I find these two kind of book headers, and they are clearly based on the same idea, but somebody redid the whole thing. Somebody could probably do a whole research on that. Or early examples of laziness or reusal of plates. Not exactly, I guess the plates were expensive and these were very cheap magazines. So it's just a beautiful experience to find this. One of my favorite kind of dumps of data which are unsorted and allow me to go on discoveries is the Internet Archive, because it spans everything from audio, video, books, texts, and I can constantly go in there and find new things. And so going with the theme of hands, they have, I think, 6 million book pages, actually object extracted from book pages on Flickr, and again, using feature vectors and other tools I built for myself quickly, I can really say, find me anything else that looks similar. And of course, there's a lot of manual work involved because as we all know, these things are very imprecise, especially if your data is data is never clean. But the joy is then using the machine first to give you some prompts, and then you still make the final decisions. So using this as these elements, for example, as resources, I built me another tool which I'm a big fan of collage, and in some sense everything I do is some sort of a collage, taking artifacts from the past or knowledge from the past and putting it in a new context. So I built me a tool that extracts these objects, builds a few rules around it, and then I can create these generative collages where I call this tool Ernst, like Max Ernst, because of course he was the big inspiration from this. And yes, it allows me then to just play around and have the machine give me all these proposals for things that can be assembled from these elements. Oh, this is called Run Hipster Run. I don't know. So in the end, that's how I work. So it just really puts these things together. It knows there are two edges. It can plug them together, and then it shows me thousands of examples. I say, oh yeah, so I didn't build this actually. It just made it from the data. Of course, nowadays I'm dabbling a lot with what's commonly called AI. So in the generative sense and in the analytical sense. And so I'm not such a big fan of metadata. I know you all love it, but I like to go back to ideally I work a lot with images, and so I take feature vectors and stuff that neural networks extract from these images, because metadata is such a hard decision. It says this is true and this is false, or this is the truth. Whereas if I have feature vectors, I have these soft multidimensional spaces where in the end I decide where the edge is, or maybe where the area between them is. And so that's why I use that a lot in my work. But so, of course, once you have access to huge collections and AI, you can extract additional information from images, like poses, for example. So this is just some examples of using open pose model, which looks at a painting and gives me exactly back the 3D figures of people standing in there. So in this case, I'm just using this as an illustration, but I'm also reusing that data for further purposes. For example, here, then I trained a model which takes this pose data and replaces the content from an original photo with a GAN-generated image that uses the pose data found. Or, of course, this also works in real time, so I have a camera input. I trained my models on, well, Western European paintings, and of course, this again reveals all the issues we know with cultural data, that her gender and skin color is obviously not my decision. Well, I decided to use that data, like that amount of time, and well, in that time, people who were painted were of a certain age if they were female, and of course had a certain skin color. So the tricky part is finding actual data if you want to, like, you know about the bias, but you want to go against it. It is a lot of hard work to compile that data. So in the end, if you want to change it, you actually have to either put it out yourself or help people curate and find alternative forms or stuff that is, yeah, because the machine will just give you the average or the statistics. One more little example, the same model. It sees faces everywhere. This time, old white guys. But yeah, so a bit of fun. Yeah, once you train the model to look for faces, it sees faces everywhere. Here we have a bit of Titanic. One last thing, so there's one source of data which is a lot, and that is moving pictures, and right now I'm exploring in that direction. The Internet Archive has a fantastic collection of ephemeral movies and educational movies, and I'm playing around with the idea if I can search in that, because again, for my machines to kind of use this, it's hard to search in there, but I found some ways to classify entire scenes, and then, one way is I can give it a video example of what I'm looking for. So before it was me speaking, and then I get talking heads. You can also see how the machine misinterprets you, which I found, of course, very interesting, because creativity is about like getting surprised and getting different kind of, things that you expect. Okay, so finding hands in videos, and well, then I can, for example, go and say, give me all the scenes in movies where people are doing something with their hands. And I think I just got 30 seconds, but I wanted to show you one way how I can use these extracted information. And it's very entertaining, and sorry for the choice of the trailer. You have to look on the right side. What it does is I have a movie trailer, an existing film, in this case it's a Star Wars trailer, and my machine is replacing every scene in that with some other scene from the archive. So it's not very deep, but it's funny to watch how the machine interprets this. So we're coming to that now. So look on the right. So what it does is actually it interprets motion, structure, whatever is going on. Sometimes
you're after
even
something. Is it revenge? Money? Or is it something else? You look good. A little rough around the edges, but good.
Heard about a job. Big shot gangster putting together crew.
I'm a driver, and I'm a flyer. I waited a long time for a shot like this.
Okay. You can watch the rest somewhere else, but thank you.
Okay. First of all, sorry, that was loud. I just want to thank Mario for our hashtag as we put together our API. For the team, it's going to be wild, open, and a little dirty. That's what we're going to aspire to, and you know, it takes a lot of pressure off. So thank you. This was wonderful to hear the different ways that you're using creativity and storytelling and serving visitors in exploring the world. One question I wanted to ask is, how has technology changed the way you do your work and creative process?
Well, in my case, I've been trying to, like all my life, I have been fascinated by the possibilities of technology to help me create my stuff. But let's say over the last 5 years, definitely machine learning classification took, like, it got the bridge to get, I don't know how you call it, it became more organic. So what I was looking for, or what the technology proposed me, became much more, like, I didn't have to know the right search term or keyword, but I can, it feels more natural now to interact with this data and finding things, and especially, yeah, finding things that are buried. And so the whole AI thing is definitely changing a lot for me now. And that only happened during the last 3 years, maybe, in that extent. Yeah.
I agree with that, but also for me, I always like call myself like a lazy type A, because I'm like perfectionist, but I'm like, I don't want to like waste time fixing things or refiguring how we're going to use the data. So we spent a lot of time iterating on the back end so that we can do some really cool things. And like, we don't even know what we're making, but then there's an idea and we can really focus, or we can have experts really focus on the idea more than how you're going to make it sustainable, how are you going to get the data there, how are people going to search it. And also the difference between someone the other day said about browsing and searching, we have to deal with that constantly and have it integrate, and that's what is allowing us now to do both.
I am probably the least tech-savvy person in this building right now, but I'm an old-school print journalist from, you know, long before we were doing web graphics, and technology for me is just amazing because I can tell stories in such new and different ways that I never could. It's like Harry Potter world. We can make things move on the screen and all. And so it just opens up so many more possibilities and ways to tell stories that we couldn't do in the past.
Yeah, what Bonnie said. You know, when you look at the things that we're doing a lot these days, augmented reality and photogrammetry, the examples that you saw, it just would have not been possible, what, like 5 years ago? Well, augmented reality was not doable maybe a year and a half ago on our phones, and now we all probably have a device that's capable of putting things in your environment in a way that's literally mind-blowing. Well, not literally, but figuratively speaking, not literally. So these things to me are very exciting because they're changing so quickly. It seems like every year we have a new feature set that makes us able to see these things in a different way. I think sometimes we forget how special it is to have an object in space and see it there. Like something as simple as a Triceratops skull. You know, I showed that to my 8-year-old, and I put it in the living room, and her reaction was priceless. She's looking around and going, wow, it's so big. And you get that sort of reaction, I don't think you get easily out of looking at the skull in a different medium. And so these technologies are just, it's really fun.
So the pressure's on us to keep serving up these things that you can, yeah, so we better get to it. One last question before we open it up to people. How, since we have you here and we want your advice, as we embark on open access next year and start with phase 1, you know, with the wild and the open and the dirty, and go from there, how, what can we do to ensure that they are accessible to you in ways that serve in your various areas?
Well, specifically for our, as I mentioned before, for our needs, us having to put it on the web, having something that can be sort of web ready, so to speak, where the resolution is something that we can put on the web would help quite a bit. But just having it, honestly, just having it there is a huge deal. It just means that stories, or we can think of stories that we have never thought of before.
I would say for me, I'm absolutely the opposite of Mario. I want to be pointed to one specific thing, or 2 or 3 or 4. So having somebody who can cut through all of this and say, yes, this is what you're looking for in our collection, that's incredibly helpful, usually for my purposes.
Well, we just opened last January, and the thing that was really important to us that we were like, we wanted to have the open access with the most accessible API and all different formats, and a GitHub that there was easily, if you have any question, if you wanted doing it being a big data scientist or an individual from home, there's a way you can write to us within 24 hours. We actually have adapted things when we didn't even think about it. We've changed searches. As much as Mario doesn't want to search for things, he does. He wants all those hands, and he wants not just hands that are drawings, maybe. Like, there are a lot of things out there that can help you then, you know, create. So we're ongoing in that. When we opened it up to all these different repositories, we asked them before we opened it up, what is it that's not working for you? We asked top developers everywhere to say, give us feedback. And so we're constantly iterating, and we put up those notices that say, you can use this any way you want, which language people at museums didn't like to see. But I pushed that, why are we hiding that you can, even if we don't like it?
Well, I mean, what I saw, what you did, is pretty much exactly what I want. So you're really doing a great job there, as far as so I hope your API is kind of. Well, I have to check it out, because of course there's always the thing, like with every different collection you have to learn a new API. So, well, sometimes there are people using the same, but everybody wants to do their own thing. So that would be great if people could come to, but it will never happen that they reuse somebody else's API maybe, because it turned out to be working, but no. Of course, CC0 is amazing, so that's what I want. And of course, you don't be too shy about sharing anything, right? Like it's like, oh no, we can't share this, because of course I'm only speaking for myself, and definitely you have to have the more curated approach, but also open up anything if possible. So some people might be using it for something you didn't expect. That would definitely be on my wish list. And yeah, it's happening more and more. So I'm like, compared to how it looked 5 years ago, it's already wonderland, right? I mean, so I'm already very happy with what's happening already. So.
Thank you. So any questions?
My question is mainly for Ms. Alexander. I met you at CMA during the Kusama tour when I was up there from the Hirshhorn. What impressed me most about your presentation was your org chart and your flow between departments and et cetera. That is a practical aspect of this that is very interesting to me. So my question is, at some point you started this, you partnered up with a lot of people along the way, but somebody at your museum figured out we have to do this and made it happen. Somebody high up in the chain of command, and managed to start the money up. Was it the board? Was it the director? Who did this?
Well, can we keep a secret here? I came to the museum in 2010 in the middle of this building project, and money had been given by the Maltese, who also did the Spy Museum, to use technology, art, and design to make art more accessible, very general. And the museum had already gone down a path of creating things that we kind of have already seen. And my feeling, back to the laziness, is what I saw was stuff that was not going to, as soon as you open a project in a museum, people have 10 new projects to go to. So this idea of, you know, you can fight about who's going to be in charge of changing the content on the Zoom wall. No one cares about it once it opens, you know. So my whole thing is that how a museum works has to make everything, all the content has to be live and generated by what people are doing in their jobs. So that's why everything, you can change different things, but when things go on view, go to conservation, go on loan, it's reflected live everywhere. And that was where we began. Now, we've had 5 directors since I came. I've been extremely lucky that every director saw the importance, the future of this. And not all of them were, none of them were like super digital, but they saw the importance, and not the rest of the museum. The other thing is the wall in 2012, doing a prototype and bringing it to a board meeting and saying, picture this 20 feet. This is like, our museum's been closed, like getting people to believe in it. But we're one of the museums that's been iterative. We've completely changed. Our backend's gone this way. We've torn it up and gone back a little bit because we keep trying to make it so we can focus on the new fun stuff, and that the regular stuff in the museum, just people are doing their normal jobs. So, was that helpful? Okay. And also, I'm a pain in the neck in meetings, and when I want something, I want something.
Any other questions? Oh, wait, that might be 2.
Hello, this is for the Washington Post team. I'm a longtime subscriber. But what sort of feedback do you get from your readers about overload? I will admit sometimes when I come to the Washington Post website and I see there's a web production, I won't go to it because I'm too tired at the end of the day to engage with it fully. So how do you think about that? And I would imagine Gallery 1 or Artlands also, how do we think about overload of the community of users?
We think about it differently than we used to. In the African American Museum piece, as I said, we had lots of little rollovers and things like that. We don't do that anymore. We're much more, we try to give you an experience that you don't have to go find, I would say, in general. Like, we much more scroll down, you're gonna see it, here's what you read, okay, keep scrolling. It's much more natural for a reader rather than to have to go in and pick things apart. And I think we're very conscious of that now, and we don't want you to be too tired at the end of the day to just scroll. All you have to do is move this finger, that's it. So that's what we try to do. I think we're trying to simplify. At the beginning, we tried to put everything in there. Oh, it's the web, it's not print. We can put so much in here, and we can have things pop up here and there, and we've gone way cleaner, much less clutter. And just to give you an experience that's augmented, but not just such a pain to deal with that you don't want to do it. So as far as feedback, I personally have not gotten a lot of that because I get feedback when the stories are wrong and they don't like the stories or they don't like the words. You're the visual.
We got great feedback on the Triceratops story. I think every single comment was, this is great, which is great to hear, of course. Yeah, I think our readers really like these kinds of stories.
I'll just say quickly regarding Artland Gallery is we've spent a lot of energy, like how do you get people to connect with the art? And we've really worked on no interface. We have each thing is a different way of appealing to. We've also tried to have not one activity that, like in 2012, everyone's like, I love make a face or make a pose. But now it's like, I love, and I don't know what's coming out because we try to do people more emotional, more historical, but everything it's gesture-based, and we designed for the digital native because we were so worried about our 45 plus people not understanding it that we decided to say, no, if it's designed really well and designed for the digital native, then everyone will start to use it.
I have a question, Diane, if we can. First of all, thank you all for answering all of my emails the last several months. I appreciate that. But when thinking about creativity, that implies risk-taking. You have to take risks to be creative. And so could you talk a little bit about when those risks have been successful and maybe when they've been a little bit less successful or have failed?
Well, I would say from my point of view, a lot of these stories that we showed, there's a large amount of risk. Some of these things, you don't know what the model is going to turn, how it's going to look until it does. You know, the Triceratops took a lot more work because I didn't know how to shoot it. And if I would do it now, it would have taken me way less time. So there's a lot of risk. But then always the story is first. So then what we end up doing is just, you know, you might go into a story thinking, my model is going to turn out this way. It might not, but then we always find a way to make whatever we get sort of fit the story. And I think that's another interesting sort of challenge, to make sure that in the end, when you walk out of the experience, you're not thinking, oh, it was a clever use of that technology that they did, and but they think, oh, now I know something about a Triceratops I didn't know before, and I think they used some cool tech, I don't know. So hopefully, if we've done our job well, then we got to that point.
I would say that we take calculated risks all the time, and because we spend a lot of on the back end, anything that we do that doesn't quite work, we can there's always this fear of everything we were building, like, can you make sure no one puts a curse word? Can you do this? Can you do that? Because everything projects live. But as we all know in like social media, yeah, we have a way to take it down, but usually there's tons of other stuff over it by the time you get to it. And so it's about showing that these are small risks, but learning things. And I guess the failure once was, we were so proud that our phones connect to every interactive, so you can play with your hands, and then whatever you play goes right to your phone, and your picture goes right to your photos. But we didn't realize Android people always have their phone disconnects after 10 seconds, so it goes to dark. And so, there were things that we didn't think about when we thought, and so.
Well, I think the biggest risk I can have is that, like, I invest a week of work in something that didn't turn out to give me anything, like building tools to connect to an API, and then I get data back, and I don't know, I don't find anything. But even then, usually I still learn something, and I'm constantly reusing stuff anyway. So. Yeah, nobody dies with my work. So and the worst thing that can happen, I make something and I'm the only one who likes it. So that's the other thing. But yeah, I fear I'm pretty much risk-free in my profession. So.
Hi there. I really love this idea of art. You know, I'm a librarian that has an artist background as well, so the idea of like data is your medium is really fascinating to me. And then also the idea of, you know, open access is great, but on the other hand, it's very anonymous. So when I was watching, you know, what you're doing with images from the Internet Archive, and my library is a heavy contributor to the Internet Archive, I selfishly want not attribution, but I want to be able to use what you've created as evidence. It's just part of the sustainability argument. You know, when I put on my administrator hat and I have to sell my program to stakeholders, like, how do I become more aware? Like, I don't need like direct attribution, but there's no citations the same way there is in like a scholarly journal. I just have to hope it shows up on a blog post somewhere. I'm like, oh, that's our stuff, and I can, you know, go to our collectors and our administrators and our state senators and say, look what we're supporting here. So how do I do that?
Oh, I can feel what you say. So, and usually, let's say with a project like Ernst, I mean, I've been writing about where I got the data from. Of course, so there's the thing that the original data is 100, 200 years old, so there's no copyright. I don't have to, I mean, I don't even know sometimes where it came from. In my process, sometimes, I don't even know what the original image was. So I could go back and say, oh, this is image ID, and then I go back to the data set. But yeah, that's maybe unfair for me to just use it as raw material. So I try to be like open where I got it from, saying like I used the Internet Archive, or I used the British Library, or Smithsonian collection. So, but yes, if I make a piece, then it might show up in the small print, but I will not put it on top of the image, right? Because it feels like at some point it becomes mine. And of course, I'm trying to be careful not. But yes, in a way, I'm thankful, of course, that the data is there, and I try to, like, when I tweet about it, or, well, I rarely write about it, but I try to be open in where I got it from, and, like, sending other people there. Of course, that's the other idea, that, like, I found it here, hey, maybe you find something there too. But yeah, that's the crux about having CC0 or something. Like, you have to put it in your license in a way. If you want attribution, you have to put it in a license, and then I will respect it. But and otherwise, I try to be nice, but it will not put it on the work itself. I will put it in the context of the work. I will try to be open about it, where I got it from. I mean, it's.
I just want to say something because you guys who are wanting to do open access, it's really what you're saying is always a concern. And so that's why we had 36 plus fields of all of our metadata, even with images that are not in open access. All of our metadata is CCO, including our provenance, including our descriptions, including everything. Now that freaked a lot of people out at the museum, but I kept saying, that's the context that will stay with that image. Now, he doesn't need to use it, but it's easily there. And people want to attribute you for different things. So we're seeing more people, are taking our images for textbooks and things, and we even say on our, if you want to attribute, here's what you can do. So by giving people everything, you actually get, people are already stealing your stuff and doing things and not giving you attribution. Help them do it the right way.
I think on that we have to end, but I do want to. I do want to just make sure everybody stays. We have the final keynote after this session, so we'll have a 10-minute break. But thank you very, very much.